Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's live webinar, which is our Pitch News overview for Scottish schools. Thank you so much for joining us live today, and I hope you're having a great start to the new school year if all your children have returned. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's live webinar, which is our if you have any questions at all, please add them to the chat window, and then we can respond to them as they come through. In terms of the session, it is being recorded, and you will be sent a link after the session. You will be also sent the slides and notes as well as they come through. Our details are on the screen, so if you want to have a look at the website or any of the resources after that I covered today, feel free to do that. Also, I know we have a mixture of schools that are currently using Pitch News and those that are considering Pitch News. So welcome to everybody, and hopefully you'll get lots of ideas and ways you can use resources, or if you're new, learn a little bit more about the resources. So the reason why at Pitch News we do, so we produce a weekly news resource for all schools. And the reason why we do that is because it covers so many things, and it's so important for children to learn about the wider world around us. So in terms of the news, what it covers, political issues, social issues, moral issues, environmental issues, different cultures. So there's lots of opportunities for children to learn about different topics. And for those of you that know the format that Pitch News comes in, it comes as a weekly ready-made PowerPoint that you can use in lots of different ways that I'll explore, but it's all based around one picture every week from a big story from the news, and then a really thought-provoking, challenging, open-ended question. And I will be asking you to use the chat that you can see at the side of the screen. Why do you think that, what are some of the reasons why we teach the news in school? So can you think of any reasons why we might teach the news? Why you might use it in the classroom, why you're here, really, what you want to get from the session as well, as much as anything else. And I've just put our reasons on there. So please feel free to add those to the chat window now. Okay, so as you're thinking about that, and I can see some responses coming through now. So we believe that there's real life learning opportunities for things that are happening right now in the moment, which is really empowering for children, so they can think about how they can influence change locally and globally. What's going on in the news can directly link to all different subjects, different areas, and it's fresh and new content. And really, in terms of the things like empathy, it can bring the world closer to the children's everyday lives, making them more aware and understanding about the world we're living. And Laura said for children to become globally aware as well. So it's a really important one. And thanks for sharing that. So in terms of what we're going to cover, so we will look at some of the ways that Pitch News can really help you tie in with what you're doing already in school, and how you might use resources. So in terms of how Pitch News fits the CFE, it directly links to the 4 capacities. So it helps children become confident individuals by sharing their opinions, responsible citizens, understanding global and local issues, effective contributors through discussing and debating their ideas, and successful learners, things like critical thinking and developing their literacy. And in terms of experiences and outcomes, the weekly questions and activities support the CFE across literacy, social studies, health and wellbeing, and then RME as well. So all of those different areas through using Pitch News. And I'll say you'll get a copy of this. So if you want to utilise this in any of your notes or any of your accountability or other documents, feel free to take that and use this. So you can see how using the weekly resource can really help with that. So in terms of our weekly pack, so we send Pitch News to all of our schools every Friday. So every Friday about 7 o'clock, you'll receive a new pack, and you can share this in school. We can email it directly. If your school subscribe and you're not receiving it, please feel free to email us directly and we can add you on, because we're happy to email this to as many people as required. So in terms of what's in the PowerPoint, it's in the same format for you every week. Lots of you might be familiar with this. The first slide, as you can see on the screen, is the poster image. So that image is really good if you want to, you can be quite creative with this. So that might be printed off. You might put that on a display board or share it somewhere. And really, you might do this at the start of the week so children can really ponder about what that story might be about, what might be happening, that kind of thing. And they can maybe make predictions. So that first image can be really powerful. The next slide on there, look on the left-hand side there, is the poster with the big question. So the questions are very philosophy-based and they're very open-ended. And again, the idea is you might want to pose that question. You might have it up on a smart board. You might want children to think about their responses before they know anything about the story, and then you can come back to it later. So that can be really powerful for that. We always have a slide with information about the story as well. So that's always slide number 3. In there, you'll see at the bottom of that slide, and this often gets overlooked, so hopefully it's useful for some of you to discover this today. We have 3 links on there. So the top one is a link to the news story. So that's a verified article about that story. The next one is a link to a video. And this is really good if you're using Picture News in an assembly with children, or even if you're using it in a smaller classroom session, but you've got access to be able to watch videos. That's a 3-minute or less video clip about that story. And so that could be a nice point there to show it when you're introducing the story. The third section is our virtual Picture News. So we have lots of schools that have been with us for years that sometimes they aren't aware of this, that this exists. So that link there will take you to our virtual Picture News recording. So this is our teacher-led overview of the story. This is really good if you're new to Picture News and you want some ideas, or if Picture News is being used maybe by a cover teacher or somebody that's not used to teaching or using Picture News. They can watch this, or you can watch this with your class periodically, or bits of it sometimes used in an assembly as well. So that's, you can access that on there. So that's the third link down, and that's called our virtual Picture News. Then we have lots of information about the story. We always have a world map. So behind me, you can see I've got a display. So lots of our schools will have a display board. It might be a whole school display board, or it might be more of a class display board, where you can have print off the posters, print off you might have some of the map of the world, and it can be really easily changed. Lots of our schools have things like Picture News monitors that will be responsible for changing the displays, which is a nice area of responsibility. And then sometimes if you might have post-it notes with children's responses in, so you can utilise that in that way as well. And then we always have resources linked to that. So the assembly resource, as it's called, can be used in an assembly, or it can be used in a classroom setting, or it might be printed off, could be shared at home, or it might be used in classrooms, or as part of a literacy session as well. So it can be used in lots and lots of different ways. And you'll see there the teacher's notes on there as well. So towards the end of your PowerPoint presentation, we have the teacher's notes to give you not a prescriptive plan, but just guidance and ideas for how you might want to lead the session. As I'm going through as well this session, anybody who's using Picture News and would like to share some of the ways that they use it, that would be absolutely incredible, because it's really good for us to learn about how you're using it. And I'm also sure lots of other people could hear about how you're using it and learn from that as well. So do feel free to continue typing in the chat any of your thoughts and ideas and ways that you use the resources. We always have a how does it make me feel slide. So the idea really is, after the children have seen the picture and the question, learnt a little bit more about the news story, they then have an opportunity to share their own personal response. And what we find is children get a lot better over time at describing their own thoughts and feelings. And what it also really does, depending on the story, you might find that there's a really wide range of emotions that the children respond to that news story. And they might surprise each other, and you can learn an awful lot about the children and their perceptions and experiences of the world through doing this. And lots of our schools will maybe have a whole school Picture News assembly on the Monday, and then they might have a classroom session, maybe for just half an hour, where the story can be explored a little bit further later on in the week. And you might really delve into some of these thoughts and feelings that children have in response to the news. So that can be really powerful as well. So here's the weekly pack. So more resources. So as I mentioned, we have the assembly resource. We also then have resource 1 and resource 2. And then behind those are the teacher's notes. So these very much are flexible, easy to use. We always say don't feel like you have to use everything every week. So you might have some slides you use every week, other slides that you come back to and use periodically, depending on what's happening. And then we also have in the pack, that I'm sure some of you will be aware of, is our Picture News Spotlight. So this is our mini newspaper, really, and this is separate from the main story. So this can be used in completely different ways. And you'll notice there's some ideas for how you might use it. If you have any other ideas for how you use child-friendly newspapers in school, please feel free to type those into the chat now. So the idea really with the child-friendly newspapers, it's 4 different stories that you can utilise. So you can use them for reading, for comprehension. Lots of our schools will print these off every week and share them at home, or they maybe will be put in a library or a shared area. So they're yours to utilise kind of as you feel appropriate. And if you're looking at newspaper articles, obviously these can come up and you can log on to the online area, which I'll come to in a little bit, and download previous ones. So you've got lots and lots of newspaper content that you can utilise. So we've got, I ask pupils to, this is Fiona, thanks Fiona, write their feelings and other notes on mini whiteboards. So they might write their responses to those news stories or talk about them in that way. And you can see there's some ideas that we've put together. Emotion word wall. So often when we look at the news with children in the classroom, it's maybe more in an informative way. So the idea of Picture News that we like to do is really think of it in a personal way and your association to it, and learning from the news as much as just about it. So it's a really good opportunity to children to learn about themselves, about each other, understand our feelings. So that can be linked through that as well. So the emotion word wall we do like. I won't read all of these because I'm sure you can read them, and lots of these you'll be doing already. Things like headline match, listening for details, news through art's quite a creative one. So maybe giving the children a whiteboard and a pen and asking them to draw something that they feel represents that story or how they feel, can be a very creative way of exploring feelings. Interviewing, so you might do have one child role play as somebody from the news story, or maybe the class could be interviewers and thinking of questions. And so lots of different creative ways that you could utilise with your newspaper pack. And that comes towards the end of your PowerPoint presentation each week. So media literacy, so I wanted to bring this one up. This is a new part of the Picture News pack. So media literacy is becoming increasingly important. Children are becoming much more immersed really in the online world in terms of the content, where they're finding information, where they're seeing information, they're being exposed to a lot more. So the media literacy skills we believe are really important for children to develop from a very young age. So as they go through school, they're able to develop and understand and develop the skills to be able to make sense of the content that's being put in front of them and that they're being exposed to. And so what we do is we choose one of these every week that's tied with our story. So it's giving children the chance to, week on week, they're being exposed to different media literacy skills, and they're able to really think about and reflect on those. So that slide, as I say, you'll receive this after the session. So that can be printed. You might want to have a laminated copy of that. And then you can ask the children to think about, when they're looking at different news stories, having all of these skills and these questions in their mind when they're exploring it. So that can be quite a useful slide. So here's an example of one that we've done in the past. So this was looking at evaluating the news story. So what is the purpose of the news story? And then we give you, so this is one of your slides, questions to discuss a reflection, and then an activity. So if you want to go away and do something, that's something that you can do as well. Then we always have every week, again, as I say, if you are new to Picture News, as I'm going through this, maybe think about one or two of these slides that you could really embed straight away. So you could maybe have a Picture News display, or you might have an area where you put the newspapers every week, or you might have a weekly assembly that you're going to start using Picture News. Just have a think about how you might use it. And don't worry if you're feeling a bit overwhelmed with all of the different slides and information that are included, because I am giving you an overview of everything. Useful vocabulary and take home. So the useful vocabulary keywords. So again, that might be a slide that you want to print out every week and put on if you've got a literacy working wall, and you could have a child that updates this. So you've got those words, and maybe that could be something you implement each week, so children use those different words throughout the week. And then the take home slide. So this really is if you're wanting the children to continue some of these conversations at home, and have them with explain the news story to their families, and if you want the children's families to know what they've been learning about through the news and the types of topics, that can be a really powerful one. And some schools will choose to do this every week. So it might be something that goes on the whole school newsletter, or if you have X, or if you use other social media, you might put that on there, or your school website. So parents can see. It might be printed off. It might be something you share periodically, depending on what the news story is. It might be something that you share with your families. And I know some schools will also do Picture News or what's happening in the world drop-in sessions and Picture News clubs. And that might be something that you invite your families to as well, as a way to encourage children to talk to their families, talk to their parents, and discuss what's happening in the wider world. And so that slide's a great one, as I say, to print and to share at home with families. Another way you can really utilise the resources is for debating. So again, this is a great slide you might want to print. If you have a debating club in school, or if you're thinking of setting up a debating club in school, this one can be really useful and powerful for this. And this slide can be great to have printed out, or if you're doing debates in literacy and you're wanting to practice those, it can be really good. So using the story, using your Picture News content, you have instant material every week. We try and choose stories that have a lot to discuss. So there's lots of different perspectives, and how we frame our questions, our big weekly questions, are very open-ended. So that they lend themselves really for a debate. And I know lots of schools might have, on a Friday afternoon, they might have 20 minutes Picture News debate. So this could be as well as alongside an assembly. And all you need to do is have the poster up with the big question, or children can have copies of it, and then they could have a copy of this. And then 20 minutes of practicing debating skills, practicing sharing opinions and thoughts, and using some of these sentence openers to really help structure. And what we found with schools that do this and classes that do this is that really quickly the children develop lots and lots of skills. So not only are they learning about the world around them and discussing the news, they're learning respect, empathy, how to structure arguments and debates, and how to listen to others in a polite and respectful way. And they'll get really good at it. And we hear that from lots of schools that they absolutely love, and it's lots of children's highlight of the week to have these really open-ended discussions. And children that maybe wouldn't necessarily contribute to other areas of the subject areas, they love getting involved in the Picture News debate, because it's very inclusive. There's no right or wrong, and it's and as the teacher, you can create a really safe space, so they know when they're doing their Picture News assemblies or discussions or debates, that there's no wrong answer, so their opinion is always valid. And so that can make it a really good part of the week to discuss, to use your Picture News. So in terms of Picture News and the wider impact, we believe through the debates, through the assemblies, through the children learning about what's happening in the world and really thinking about it and reflecting on it, they can take action, and that action can have a lot of impact. So things like every year we have our Pitch News Impact Awards. And these are a really good opportunity. And I'm sure there's some of you here that maybe have taken part in them or received one of our Impact Awards. And they are really an opportunity, because we had lots of schools were sending us all the different ways that they use resources and the impact and the things that children have done, the really positive changes, because they learned about story and were inspired to and empowered to do something. So we launched our Impact Awards, and we hear so many positive things that schools are doing to really celebrate what's happening. So things like one of the big questions was, should we spend more time with people who are older than us? And that was looking at a story about loneliness. And one of our schools developed a link with a local care home, and they set up that partnership, and every week a different class would visit. So really positive impact on their local community. Can we learn to be happy? Looking at happiness rates of different countries that week. It was a wellbeing award a school applied to and won a wellbeing award. Our library still needed at Modern Times, which was looking at the closure of lots of local libraries. So one of our schools created a school bus community library. Do we have more clothes than we need? One of our schools responded to that and was looking at fast fashion, organised a second-hand clothes sale, so you can utilise that in that way. And then, should women footballers be paid the same as men? So this was looking at the pay differences of national teams. One of our schools, I think a few of them, wrote letters of complaint to FIFA, children gaining interest in women's football and women's tournaments, and just raising awareness of that. So we really love hearing about how our schools do that. And I think by exposing the children to different stories every week, and what we do at Pitch News is choose a really wide variety of stories. And sometimes it's just a case of, at the end of the Pitch News session, whether it's in class or in an assembly, is asking the children if there is anything that they think they can do, if there is anything that they think needs changing, and just thinking about that story as a citizen of the world. So is there anything here that we can do? And then responding to that. Now, our online area. So again, this is something that whenever I share this in webinars and in training, when I go to schools, lots of people will say, oh, I didn't know there was an online area, because we email everything out to all of you, to our schools. Not everyone is aware of the online area. So we do have an online area. So if you go to our website, so if you put Pitch News into your search engine, we're usually at the top. On there, you can go onto the members area. If you're not sure about your username and password, you can email us and ask us, and we'll send it across, and we can set you up an individual account as well, so everybody in school can have their own login for that. On there, you'll find lots and lots of different things. So we've got all of our past packs, so you can search for a keyword. So if, for example, you're doing something like climate change as a topic, you can search for climate change and see if there's any past packs that you would like to utilise that would be helpful for you to use. So you can use those in that way. We also have a link to the virtual recording on there. And also something that's really useful to be aware of on the online area is we have an editable version of the PowerPoint. So when we email you your PowerPoint, you can delete slides and you can move them around, but you can't actually edit the content. And we email that one out to you because it's a much smaller file. But on the online area, we have the fully editable file. So for whatever reason, if you find a resource, but maybe you want to update it or change the content, and even if when we email your Friday pack and it's a current one and you just want to tweak it or change it, you can go on there and download it, and then you can change the text, you can delete the pictures and move it around and make it a really bespoke presentation if you want to do that. So I think that's quite useful to know that you can access that in that way. So that's our online area where you can access all of our resources. There's lots and lots of other things on there as well. So there's a useful resources section, and there's also a coverage document. And so the coverage document is for your records. So this gives you a list of all the stories that we've covered and all the big questions. and value, so you can have a copy of it. So because we can't send, we always get asked if we can send a plan of what's coming up in Pitch News, but we do respond to the news as it happens. So each week we write the pack the week before, and then it gets sent out straight away. So because we can't send you a plan of the year ahead, periodically we send our overview at the end of each session with all the stories, and as I say, the values and the questions. You can print that off, put it in a folder, and then that could be for your assemblies or for whatever work that you've tied in with Pitch News, so you can see what's been covered. Lots of our schools as well will have maybe a Pitch News scrapbook or a floor book. So it might be like an A2 big poster book where they print off the posters and some of the children's responses and some of your Pitch News work. Or if you have a Pitch News display like this one, and you update it every week, you might take a weekly picture and then print it off, so you've got a record of it. And then it's really good to look back on at the end of the year. You've got a full year of all the news stories, so what's happened in the year, lots of the children's responses. So that can be really powerful in that sense. So that's our online area. So if you've not been on there, it's definitely worth having a look. And as I say, if you're not sure of your login details, please just email us, or you can, when I send the notes afterwards, you can reply to my email, and we'll send it over for you, and we can set one up for you. Something else we have that you may not be aware of is our Pitch News discussion board. So this basically is where you can add your own thoughts and comments. So you can do this, individual children can do this, or you might want to do this as a whole class. And children can do this at home as well with their families. And then you can also have the opportunity to read the comments of other children in other places for what their thoughts and responses are to the news that week. And so this website, you don't need to log into this. So the idea is, if you've got, children might all be on an iPad or a tablet or a laptop, and you want them to, after you've done your Pitch News session, add their response. And so you could order this individually. Everybody can log on to that website. So it's just at the bottom of the screen there. So it's picture-news.co.uk/discuss. And that will always take you to the most up-to-date version of Pitch News. And then you can add your response to that. And then we choose 9 of those every week that go live on our website. So I know lots of schools will start their Pitch News session looking at the previous week. Just as a recap of that story, reading other children's responses from other schools all over the UK, so you can read different perspectives, which can be really interesting, and also to see if anybody's comment has been chosen, which that can be really interesting to see. So we have a range of those there. So you can see that's what it looks like. So you put your name, age, and then the comment on there as well. And then you can reply, you can send that to us, and then we will choose 9 of those and we try and choose a variety of responses. As I say, on that page, the discuss page, anybody can access that, so you can send that home, and that could be something children do as a weekly task with their families to add their response to it, or you could do it in a class. And I know lots of people will do it as part of an assembly or as a class discussion, where they might have a collective response to that, and then that might be shared. Or 2, if you've got different perspectives, you might want to add a couple of those. So lots of people for the name might put the name of the class, for example. That's something that you could do as well on there. On that page as well, there's a link to the virtual Pitch News. So that's again something that you might want to send home, so children can watch the virtual recording at home and then add their comment and their own thoughts and reflections to there. So that can be really useful for that. So that's the picture-news.co.uk/discuss page that you can go to. And I'll say it will have the most current one at the front, but then what you can do is scroll back. So you can go back as far as you like to the past ones and see past comments that have been added to that page. And then we have, hopefully some of you will know about our training because you're joining us here tonight, this afternoon, so thank you for that. You might have heard about this through an email. We also have on our website we have all of our current upcoming training sessions that you can join and register for, and they really vary. So we have sessions we have lots of sessions for teachers. So we have sessions like this, which is a welcome and introduction to Pitch News. We also have things like how to cover sensitive news with children that might also be useful for you and relevant for your parents. We have things like Pitch News for much younger children, secondary Pitch News. We have a lot of live assemblies as well for children that we do during the day, and sessions for children. So they can be really interesting to take part in as well. So you're joining children from all over the UK as part of a live assembly, which can be really quite exciting. Together we'll explore a current news story. So on our website, so again, as I say, if you type in Pitch News, just your search engine, or it's just picture-news.co.uk, in the events page, in the training, you can join any of those. They're all free, so you're very welcome as part of your Pitch News membership to join any of those live, and we'd be very happy to see you there as and when you join us. So I'm just going to come to some examples of how some of our schools have used Pitch News, and then I'll just cover finally at the end some different pictures for you, and then some different ways for you to see how you can use Pitch News, and then I will look to the live chat and see if we've got any other ideas and any other ways that you use Pitch News. So these are real school examples. So the first one is assemblies. So a Scottish primary used Pitch News posters as the focus as their weekly assembly. So discussing the big questions, and the staff there said it gave the assemblies purpose and consistency. So I mentioned assemblies, these top two I've mentioned a lot. Classroom discussions. A P5 teacher used a story about ocean plastics to spark debate, linking directly to learning for sustainability. Pupils then wrote persuasive letters to local businesses about reducing single-use plastics. So that can be really powerful in that way. As I say, real life learning and real impact on the world around them. Homeschooling, so I've mentioned this as well. A school in the Highlands used the take-home resource to engage families. One parent said it was the first time their child had explained the news to them, which is great. So really positive way of utilising it and building homeschool links. And what's a really good way of doing that is having maybe a half-hour session or a webinar for parents where you can launch Pitch News and use some of these slides, if you like, to introduce Pitch News for your parents, so they know a little bit about what it is and what it is you're covering, and the benefits of children discussing the news, and encouraging them to talk to the children about their perspectives and their responses as well. So that can be really powerful. And then pupil voice. Several schools gather pupil responses to the weekly question and share them in newsletters or wall displays, building confidence and showcasing children's thinking. So again, this is a really good one. So I know I've mentioned post-it notes and putting post-it notes on displays, or post-it notes in a big floor book if you've got a weekly recording of your Pitch News sessions. But another really good way is actually involving some of your older pupils and encouraging them to either lead the sessions. So we've seen some wonderful examples, and we do one of our training sessions for children is how to lead a Pitch News session. So how they might, and you might start by just them leading segments of it, leading up to them leading the whole thing. And then several schools, the children collecting the responses, so they might go around different classes, they might ask children in assemblies, and then being responsible for putting that together and sharing it somewhere in school. And that's obviously wonderful for their confidence, and it's showcasing the children's thinking and showing that all children have a voice and their voices are respected and heard and listened to throughout school. And that naturally then might lead into children taking action and doing something in response to that story. So finally, these are sort of a summary really of some of the ways that you might utilise Pitch News in school, and some different ideas. There's a couple of extra ones that I've not mentioned on here, and some photos for you to see. Lunchtime discussions is a big one. So again, you might want to print off the newspapers or you might print some of the resources for children to discuss. Or if you have, I've seen some really lovely schools that have in their canteen or where the children eat their food in the hall, some of the Pitch News posters printed, almost like bricks, all around the hall, so children can see those while they're eating, and then they could maybe pick one to discuss the big question while they're having their lunch, and that can be a good way. Or as I say, just have some of the resources handy on the table for children to discuss. Stored in a book and placed in the entrance hall. So as I say, you might have a big floor book or a scrapbook where all of your Pitch News ideas are recorded and shared. Sharing children's views to a wider audience. So you could utilise that in that way. So you might be using X or Blue Sky or any other platform, or YouTube if the children are creating videos. And again, that helps with their impact and using their voice. If they're wanting to do something or take action, or obviously they could write letters or send emails or whatever they might do to share their response to that story. It might even be a presentation for parents about raising awareness of the importance of recycling or something like that. Displays, so I've mentioned these a few times. So you might have whole school display like this one with the world map, post-it notes that can be changed every week, maybe with a letterbox for children to share their thoughts for the assembly that week, and the big question, and then the post obviously can be updated. You might have more of a working wall in a classroom, which might be a small board that again just gets updated every week with the story and the question. I know lots of schools will put the story and the question up, so they might put the poster up prior to the assembly, and then when children are walking into the hall, they might see it, and then they can maybe think about it, or maybe even on a Friday it gets put up, and then they can ponder it over the weekend, and then when they come in, they can then explore it further. But displays are a really nice way of, and having interactive displays as well that are changed regularly, so it gives the display board a real purpose. So it's a really live and less of a kind of static display board. Assemblies and Rights Respecting Schools award work that we do every week linked to the rights of a child. So for any of you that are working towards the Rights Respecting Schools award, Pitch News can be really good for that. So again, you might want to print out that slide each week and utilise that and have that as part of your resource. And then, as I mentioned, debating clubs or intervention groups for children that are practicing speaking and listening more, because it's very visual and picture-based and very open-ended. It's quite an inclusive resource, and the stories are very varied. So for some children that might struggle to open up when you're exploring traditional topics, perhaps they might open up in some of the Pitch News stories that are varied, and you'll find that you'll learn a lot about the children as well through some of those stories. So that is the different ways that you can use it. Now, it'd be wonderful if anybody could type into the chat any ways that they use it at the moment, so what you're doing. Or if you're very new to Pitch News and you're here for lots of ideas, what you're going to do, so how you're going to use the resources, moving on from today's session, if you could jot that down into the chat window, and I'll share some of those. That'd be lovely for me to see and to hear about the different ways that you're going to utilise the resources. Because every time I do this and I talk to people about what they're going to do or what they're doing, I learn different ways that people can use it. And it's really interesting because the whole purpose of the resources is that they are very open-ended, and they're not prescriptive resources that can only be used in one way. They're very open-ended, and depending on the children that you're teaching, the ages, you're able to utilise them in different ways. And the school and the families that you have. There might be some of the bits that are a lot more relevant for you today than others. And so Jenny said she's going to have a weekly Pitch News assembly. That's great to hear. Thank you. That's wonderful. And Andrew says he loves the idea of a Pitch News scrapbook and to record ideas. Yeah, I think there's a lot of times, and there's so many wonderful things that you'll find will come out of your Pitch News discussions, and you almost want to capture them somehow. And you might have, if you've got older children, they might be able to be responsible for recording some post-it notes, or you might be able to just jot them down as the children are saying them on a post-it note, so you just quickly got them and then you can save them and do it that way. Phil says lunchtimes. Hadn't thought of this. Yeah, I think lunchtime is a really good one. And as I say, I really like the school. I had the posters up all around. So if you've got a year or 2 years worth of pitch news, it can be, looks like wallpaper, looks like bricks, with so many different images and big questions that you can have for children to discuss. Thank you for that. Displays as well. Yeah, displays are a really good one. And it's a great, easy to change display. So once you've got the backdrop up, and it's always going to be current. If you just change it each week as part of your routine, you've always got a really up-to-date display board that children can interact with as well, which is wonderful to see. And so Fiona says, I asked pupils to write feelings and other notes on mini whiteboards. Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing those. So mini whiteboards are really good as you're going through. So they've got the opportunity to do that. We're working towards the Right Suspecting Schools Award, so this is brilliant. Thanks very much. Thanks for sharing that. I haven't got your name, but thank you for sharing that. And then as well as the debating clubs, I know lots of our schools have a pitch news club. So it isn't necessarily a debate, but it might be, you might find that you've got some children that just love the pitch news sessions so much, they want to continue the conversation, so they can do that. They can do that as well. Yeah, that's great. Okay, we are at the end of the session now. Any questions, please feel free to type those into the chat window, and I will answer those as best I can. As I say, after the session, I will email you the recording and the slides. Please feel free to use the slides to print them. If there's anything you would like to reuse or share with others in school, please feel free to do that. And then if you want me to add you to the mailing list, that's absolutely fine. Just reply and I can add you on, so you receive the new pitch news pack every week. But I hope that's been useful and you've got lots of new ideas for how to use pitch news in school each week. And I hope you have a wonderful start to the new school year, and I hope everything goes really well for you. And we're always here to help where we can. So thank you so much to everybody for joining us today, and I will stay on for another minute or so just to see if there's any questions coming through. Otherwise we'll end the session here. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Fiona. Thank you for your comment, and thank you for joining us. Thanks, Marie. Marie says it's really helpful. Thank you. That's great. I'm glad I hope you got lots of ideas for been inspired to use resources in different ways. Thank you. Okay, I can't see any questions, so I'll end the session here. But thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. And I hope you have a great rest of your week.